half of the 3rd Assault Azov Brigade disappeared near Pokrovsk, the Russian army created a hellish fire trap. Good afternoon, dear friends. Here, in our daily format, we examine the situation on the front lines, analyze maps, study advances, and draw conclusions and forecasts about how certain events will ultimately affect the overall situation on the front. Today, we will discuss the situation in the Kursk region, where significant changes have occurred over the past 24 hours. One might even call it a breakthrough. Progress in the Kursk region is often hard-won, with even a 100-meter advance being a struggle for both the armed forces of Ukraine, AFU, and the Russian army. Yet here, almost 15 square kilometers were taken under Russian army control, further shrinking the territory controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine, which continues to decrease. We will discuss this, as well as the catastrophe for the Azov Brigade near Pokrovsk, which even Ukrainian sources have reported. Let's get started. Let's open the map. Things are going poorly for the armed forces of Ukraine in the Pokrovsk direction. Ukrainian command redeployed reserves here, including 3 new mechanized brigades, 152nd, 155th, 157th, as well as the fully transferred 32nd Mechanized Brigade and the 425th Assault Regiment Scala, plus the 3rd National Guard Brigade, the very same Azov. The AFU command redeployed them here, weakening other sections of the front. This is no exaggeration. For instance, Azov was transferred from the Kharkiv direction, where, as I mentioned yesterday, the Russian army is continuing to expand its bridgehead. The goal here was to stabilize the front, as well as to reclaim lost positions. However, what we've seen instead over the past 2 days were strong counterattacks launched from Peshchenoi, with Russian positions pushed back to Shevchenko. Several times the Ukrainian armed forces even managed to enter Shevchenko, 3 times to be precise. Yet one of these attempts ended in a fire trap, resulting in the near destruction of half of the 3rd National Guard Brigade, Azov. These are not my words. This was stated by Igor Mosyachuk. Check his post. He writes that a catastrophe occurred in Shevchenko, where the elite brigade was trapped in a fire pocket, and now more than half the brigade no longer exists. They failed to hold Shevchenko and retreated back to Peshchenoi. This morning, reports emerged that Russian forces have resumed offensive operations in this area, moving back toward Peshchenoi, as well as in the Lisovka and Dachinskoye areas. Ultimately, the redeployment of reserves delayed the Russian offensive for 2 days, though the AFU command certainly anticipated different results from this maneuver. Let's move on to the events in the Kursk region, as there is enough news to discuss. Numerous assault operations are ongoing, and yesterday a breakthrough was achieved. Speaking of the Kursk region, I even posted a video showing North Korean soldiers. This is the first verified video confirming their presence and participation in combat operations in this area. Now, to the developments in the Kursk region. A significant success for the Russian army has been their advance in the north, specifically in the area west of Pogrebki. For the past 3 days, heavy fighting has occurred here, with the Russian army conducting large-scale assaults involving sometimes up to 100 infantry units. At present, Russian forces have managed to take control of only the northern part of the village. They have not yet fully pushed the AFU out, but assaults are ongoing. West of Pogrebki, a breakthrough has been achieved near the village of Kruglenkaya, where Russian troops have already reached the outskirts. Russian units have occupied the Krucheny forest and the Novoivanovskaya gully. The total advance in this section is about 5 kilometers wide, 5.04 kilometers, and 2.85 kilometers deep, meaning Ukraine lost another 14 square kilometers of territory in the Kursk region. 3% of all territory they currently hold here. However, Russian successes are also recorded in other sections. Advances are occurring on the flanks, with the goal of encircling Malaya Lochnia, thereby cutting off part of the Ukrainian grouping in Pogrebki, Novaya Sorochina, and Staraya Sorochina. You can observe this on the map. Only about 1.5 kilometers remain from the west and east to complete the encirclement. Beyond isolating this Ukrainian grouping, this would mean liberating another 20 square kilometers. Additionally, in the south, Russian forces are advancing from Plekhov to Cherkasskaya Konopelka and near Kurilovka. In Cherkasskaya Konopelka, only 6 kilometers remain to Sudja, which is a symbolic stronghold for the Ukrainian armed forces. As a result, the territory controlled by the AFU in the Kursk region is rapidly shrinking. At its peak, the AFU controlled over 1,200 square kilometers here. Now they control less than 500 square kilometers. Just yesterday, Ukrainian control shrank by another 16 square kilometers, meaning Russian forces have liberated 60% of the territories in the Kursk region. Now let's say a few more words about the situation in the Kurakovo area. Here, the Kurakovo pocket is taking shape, as confirmed by the breakthrough of the Russian army towards Zelenovka. In fact, the village has already come under firm and undeniable control. From here, the offensive will develop in two directions, towards Razliv in the west and Ulakli in the north. Notably, the Russian army needs to advance just 2.5 kilometers to physically cut off the Kurakovo-Zaporizhzhia road. Currently, it is under Russian fire control, but fire control and physical cutoff are two entirely different matters. Once the road is cut off, the current half-encirclement will turn into a full encirclement, effectively sealing the fate of the Ukrainian armed forces' Kurakovo garrison. The Borovskoye direction, as of December 17th, features of the Russian armed forces' offensive tactics. Yesterday, units of the Russian armed forces achieved another tactical success here, managing to advance further through the ravine, northwest of Zeleny Gai, towards Borovaya. Pay attention to the tactics being used by the Russian armed forces here. They are unconventional. Typically, offensives happen as follows. The attack targets hills, and once they are occupied, the Ukrainian forces are forced to retreat from the lowlands. Here, the situation is the opposite. Remember the breakthrough to Oskol. It also did not go through the hills, but advanced through lowlands via Peshanoye. The surrounding hills were taken under control only later. The reason for this tactic lies in the sharp changes in combat conditions over the past year. Drones have become not just one of the tools of war. For the Ukrainian armed forces, they are now the primary firepower. However, like any weapon, FPV drones have both strengths and weaknesses. A significant weak point for drones is their control. There are dead zones where control is lost, unless special equipment is used, and drone operators lose control of their birds at the final stage of flight. This nullifies the weapon's effectiveness. This happens primarily in lowlands surrounded by high hills, or mountains, though such terrain is absent in the combat zones in Ukraine. Specifically in the Borovaya area, where the terrain to the east is carved with deep ravines, many spots exist at the bottom of these ravines where enemy drones, if they even penetrate, become significantly less effective. Meanwhile, infantry positioned on the heights becomes pinned down by Russian drones, to the point where they are afraid to stick their noses out of their trenches, even afraid to go to the toilet. Thus, the advantages of these elevated positions turn into disadvantages for the Ukrainian armed forces in this area. The Russian armed forces exploit this by slicing through the enemy's defenses via deep ravines, flanking and striking their rear positions. This is exactly what we can see on the map. That concludes the update on the frontline situation for today.